Okay, welcome back to Violent Money TV. Today we are joined once again by Shanelle Dyer, who of course returns at PFL Europe 3, September 28th in Glasgow. Before we get anywhere near this fight, we have to talk about the last one, which I'm sure is a knockout that you're going to be talking about for the rest of your career. But I think the most interesting thing is, you know, it's a knockout of the year contender any which way you look at it, but you are a person that has other finishes that are that good. Most people, that's the crowning achievement, right? Head kick knockout, one shot, beautiful. Is there any other finishes that match that for you? Like, is that the favorite finish of your career so far?
Probably the only one I could say is obviously my pro debut, the spinning back elbow. That was a massive one for me. I have like four finishes in five fights, and every single one of my finishes are special, and the whole fights are special. I'm becoming like the human highlight reel. It's amazing because every day, so like I get about 100 plus likes on that head kick every single day. So I get notified by it all the time, and people always repost it. So I'm always watching it, and I kind of watch it on like a third person type of view. I always say I'm such a huge fan of MMA. So every time I watch the knockout, I'm so gassed. It's myself. It's amazing. It was a great knockout.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm sure, like, there's with the earlier knockouts, you'll get, people sharing them and stuff like that. But obviously, biggest stage so far where you landed that head kick. Like, is there? Did you expect, like, I'm sure a finish was what you were imagining you were gonna get in that fight, but did you imagine that it could possibly, in terms of that jump up, like the added exposure,
Yeah,
has that been like bigger than you expected it to be?
100%. PFL is one of the biggest organization in the world, and I was so happy when I got that head kick knockout. I know the exposure it will get. PFL loves those type of fights. They love highlight real knockouts, and I know they'll post it everywhere. And I know a lot of people like what's it? John Jones liked it. So many like great fighters liked it. So everyone's knowing who I am now, which is amazing. I've done all that work, and people are actually realizing how good I am as a fighter. So that's one of the main reasons why I like that knockout.
I mean, like you said, as a big fan of the sport, it must be a bit of a trip to get, fighters that I'm sure you've watched for years and admired being like, check out this knockout, because I'm sure that would have been you many years ago posting those on social
Yeah,
media
definitely,
just as a
definitely.
fan.
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm so every time I fight, I'm so excited that what I'm gonna do because it's like unrealistic. Like even my next fight, I'm just like I'm excited. What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Because something mad always happens, and I'm just excited to show people that.
I feel like there's something about watching your fights so far that is like I don't even know what to compare it to in terms of other MMA fighters. Like I think it's something that every MMA fan should watch because you get a lot of people in MMA. I speak to so many of them who are, like the most unassuming, lovely people, and then they step in the cage and they're just violent. But with
Yeah,
you, it's like another level that I don't think I've seen before, where every shot, like that last fight, it felt like, we were just waiting for the finish to happen.
yeah,
But every strike is like, that could be the one. And I know that obviously you're always trying to find the finish, but I don't get that same feeling when I'm watching everyone else where I'm almost like wincing before the shot lands
yeah.
in case it's the knockout. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think it comes from like experience. I've had a lot of fights. I've had a lot of Muay Thai fights. In the beginning of my fights, I rush for the finish. I rush my fights. I try to look for the knockouts, but I'm not looking for any knockouts now. I think I matured in my fighting style. That especially in my last fight, I probably could have finished the fight in 30 seconds realistically. But I knew for a fact that the knockout will come, and if I want a clean like great knockout, that I can't force it, and it's gonna come in time, and I believe in my abilities that it will come in time, and that's why I got a great head kick knockout, and it was set up. The whole game plan for like the fight was the head kick knockout. I was telling everyone the whole fight week, I'm gonna head kick her, I'm gonna head kick her. Look, she drops her hands, she does this. I was like, I'm gonna low kick, low kick, low kick, low kick, spam low kicks kind of, and then go for the head kick, and exactly what happens. A lot of fighters like the night before fight, you go through like a million one different scenarios in your head, and imagine for me, like the best scenario ever came into fruition in my fight. So I'm happy that happened. But I trained hard for it, I manifested it, and it came into reality, which I'm glad it did.
I'm sure, like when you're watching these opponents before you step in there with them, you're watching their previous fights, and you're like, this person's not going to be able to strike with me just from
Yeah.
watching it. When you get in there with them, is it like, is it different to when, like, obviously you're watching them and you're thinking, this person I don't think can hang with me, but when you're in there, is there like a moment where it hits where you're like, oh, there's like, now I've seen it and now I know
Yeah.
it, like I can feel it that there's a gulf, because you're so composed when looking for the finish that it almost feels like you're like when you were setting up that head kick and you keep slamming those leg kicks, it
Yeah.
feels like the end of a Mortal Kombat fight where
Yeah.
you're like trying to finish it as impressively as
Yeah.
possible because you're that like confident that you're just levels ahead of them in that moment.
For my last opponent, for all my opponents, basically, I give them respect. You have to give them benefit of the doubt. It's always every fight I go to, I expect it to be the hardest fight possible. My game plan for like the first 5 seconds, it's a sus amount, not do anything too mad, and obviously you have to respect everyone. But the second I land a hard kick, a hard low kick, or I land flush, I can see in my all my opponents' eyes that they don't want to be in that fight. I remember my last opponent, I landed the leg kick. I checked her leg kick and I returned with a leg kick. And I could see in her eyes that it hurt. And she switched stance. And I think from that moment, I knew that, yeah, the fight's mine because I low kicked you once and then that hurt you. So it's going to be a long night in the office. But for that opponent, for Mariam, she actually lost the fight in my eyes at the weigh-ins. Like how she had to get emotional, how she had to get heated up. In her eyes, the only reason why how she could win the fight on Saturday is to try to intimidate me, get in my head, and that only shows to me that she's not 100% have confidence in her abilities. So that's why she kind of had to act up, and she was giving off a lot of nervous energy. And from even from the push, like when someone pushes you and there was like zero substance from the push, there was no like in my mind, like her hands were so soft. In my mind at that moment was like, there's no way that you're taking me down on Saturday if this is all what you got. So from that push, he basically lost the fight. But in my eyes, it's when I fight, it's never personal. It's always business. So that wasn't even going through my mind any time on fight day, or definitely not in the fight. It was gonna happen regardless of the push or not.
It very much feels like, I mean, even going into this season, I'm sure again this is going to be something that I feel like is going to be a narrative for a lot of your career, is the way that you have kind of followed a little bit of a path that Dakota Ditchver has already been through, right? And it very much felt that way, I think, at the start of this season. Just the way that she ascended straight through it, and then when you were going to be entering it, it was like, okay, I can see how there's going to be some similarities here, even if it doesn't go exactly the same. Like, is that something that you watched from the outside looking in and thought like that could be me next year, or was it not a consideration at that point?
Definitely, because obviously, she won the European tournament last year, and I went to her fight in Newcastle, and I fought in the same card with her in Paris. So obviously, she won the season last year, and I'm trying to do the exact same thing this year. So it'll be wrong for me to say, and I'm not trying to emulate the same thing because she had a star performances all throughout last year, and I'm trying to do the same thing this year. Hopefully, she wins the $1 million tournament this year, and because I'm going to try to do the same thing next year, and hopefully we can get that fight down the line at some point and be one of the biggest fights.
I mean, it'd be pretty crazy to have two people go straight through PFL Europe and then straight
Yeah,
into the main
yeah,
roster. That would
they can
be,
hit that.
yeah. I mean, what do you think about this? I think her versus Tyler Santos, I think, is one of the best fights PFL have ever had. Like
Yeah,
that is a
that's a
fight.
big. It'll be
Yeah.
a great test, but respectively, both of them are great fighters, so it's going to be one of the best female fights in PFL history.
I don't know whether this is a maybe more of a case of with her being on the main roster this year, but it a lot of mostly I think from her opponents, but I'm sure also people online as well that throw criticism at Dakota and say that she hasn't fought people that are high level or whatever. And every time she just passes these
Yeah,
tests and stuff like that. I think a huge part of that as well is people maybe look at her MMA record and say, who's she beating and stuff, but you forget, like you said earlier, the amount of fights that you've had before even turning pro
yeah,
in MMA, not just in MMA,
yeah,
but obviously other martial arts as well. It's quite deceiving. And I'm sure, people are going to do stuff like that. Does any of that bother you? Do you get any of that like right now, or is that like
Not
a
not really,
main
because
roster PFL thing?
I I can only speak for myself, but I probably know that we've never I've never turned down a fight. Like I've fought anyone who put if they're put in front of me. I've never said no to anyone. If you even seen all my last opponent was what 9-2. So on paper she had a better record than me. She was more experienced than me, and all my other opponents was winning records, or they've had bigger records than me. My last Aries opponent, she's had 20 pro fights, and I've only had 3 pro fights at the time. So I've never turned down an opponent. I want to fight the best opponents, and I fight who they give me. And if they're not on my standard, it's and then it's not really my fault. One day I'm gonna fight a great fight, and the same thing's gonna happen to them.
Yeah, the interesting thing with this, obviously the upcoming semi-final against Valentina Scatizzi, not only is again the parallels between you and Dakota with her being Dakota's opponent in the final last year, but also Valentina, I think, is another example of maybe doesn't have the most impressive record, but I think there's almost like this thing now with people that enter the PFL tournament. So I think especially the PFL Europe tournament, you get a lot of fighters that don't have the most impressive records, but like it's just not a representation of who they are. And if anything, for someone like Valentina to be fighting Dakota and then you go and see what Dakota has been able to do at the world level, it's like it doesn't really add up. Is that how you see it with Valentina? Do you think her record maybe doesn't do her justice?
Yeah, definitely. Like she's been obviously chucked into the deep end. Like a lot of people in the PFL European scene, it's such a mixture of records. So unfortunately, you might fight a great fighter like Dakota last year, but she had to win a couple of fights to actually get into that position. She's had unlucky results. She's had great results, but that's what the fight game is. I still respect Valentina as opponent. I know she poses a lot of threats, which I'm gonna try to subdue in my fight. So I'm taking her seriously as I do every single opponent. I think we're gonna have a great fight.
The key for Dakota against Valentina was those Chinese that were
Yeah.
absolutely devastating. I mean, Dakota against anybody, I suppose you could say the Chinese are one of the most dangerous weapons. But is there, the head kick was the plan last time? Is there something you visualized without giving the game plan away? Is there a certain thing that you're like, I think that's the one?
Yeah. 100%. I think I know how the fight's gonna play out, and the second I start imposing my will, which I usually do in my fights, then I think it's gonna come to fruition. The game plan's been working in sparring, so I think I know how this fight's gonna go. One thing I do say is her biggest strength is her biggest weakness, and I'm gonna exploit that on fight day.
Well, I can't wait to see it, Shanelle. You are one of the scariest individuals I have ever seen step inside of a cage, and I will watch you every single time for that exact reason. So, September 28th, I'm sure we are going to get another beautiful performance from yourself. I appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
All right, have a good rest of your day. We'll catch you
You
later.
too.
See ya.